Hello, everyone. How are you? Today's breaking news. Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet is united regarding plans to slash billions of pounds from the UK's benefit bill amid a growing backlash among the party's backbenchers. Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall is expected to set out plans for welfare reform to get more people back to work and cut the cost of the benefits bill by as much as £5 billion. The proposals have been met with fierce criticism from Labour backbenchers, with veteran left-winger Diane Abbott branding the overhaul not a Labour thing to do. However, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, said that the cabinet is united behind the move and that people on long-term sickness benefits should not languish there forever. Sir Keir Starmer's official spokesperson said there is both a moral and an economic case for fixing our broken social security system that's holding our people back and our country back. There has been mounting unease over potential changes to the Personal Independence Payment, PP, the main disability benefit, with backlash prompting a rethink of rumored plans to freeze the payments rather than increase it in line with inflation. There are fears as many as 1 million people could see their benefits reduced, while charities have warned thousands of disabled people could be forced into poverty. Leading think tank the Institute for Fiscal Studies warned the disabled and long-term sick could consequently lose as much as £1,200 a year. Inside PIP, the broken health benefit Labour could cut even further. Ahead of Labour's crunch spring statement, details of the rumoured cuts to welfare have grown rife. Estimates of what the government is hoping to save have continued to grow, now sitting at around £6 billion, with health and disability-related benefits understood to be at the heart of the changes. Reforms to the Personal Independence Payment, PAP, have now been widely reported, although Labour MPs are understood to be divided on the cost-cutting package. Claimed by 3.6 million people, the payment is designed to help people with extra costs incurred by their disability, whether they are working or not. UK cannot tax and borrow its way into reforming the state. The government cannot tax and borrow alone to reform the state, Pat McFadden said. Asked whether money from expected cuts to the benefits bill could be found elsewhere, as has been suggested by Unite General Secretary Sharon Graham, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, "There are always going to be people who say elsewhere. We have a progressive tax system. The top 1% pay about a third of tax. I don't think you can, in the end, tax and borrow your way out of the need to reform the state." The Prime Minister spoke about reform of the state in a major speech last week. "We are reforming the state in more ways than one, and part of an essential reform of the state is to make sure that the welfare state that we believe in as a party is fit for the 21st century, and we cannot sit back and relax as millions, literally millions of people go on to these benefits with little or no hope of work in the future, and we have a duty to face up to that. It goes with the territory of governing. Severely disabled people will not need to be repeatedly assessed," McFadden says. "People with conditions like secondary degenerative multiple sclerosis will not be treated the same as those with conditions that may be temporary," Pat McFadden said. Asked whether people severely disabled with such conditions would need to be assessed again and again for support, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster told BBC Breakfast, "I don't want to preempt what the announcement will be, but I think for people in circumstances where it's clear they can never work and are not going to get better, and in fact it might be a degenerative condition that gets progressively worse, then people should look out for how that's treated in today's announcement, because I think those kind of conditions will feature today. And obviously you're not going to treat somebody in those circumstances the same way as someone whose condition might be temporary and with a bit of support they could go into work." Pat McFadden says Labour can be united despite expected backlash. Pat McFadden has said Labour can be held together in the coming days amid backbench anger over expected welfare cuts. Asked whether he could hold the party together in the days and hours ahead after Diane Abbott criticized the decision to invest in defence while cutting the benefits bill, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster told BBC Breakfast, "Yes, I can, and let me say two things. First of all, we've got a duty to defend the country and the cabinet, the government has completely agreed on the need to increase defense expenditure. Secondly, we are spending tens of billions on supporting people, and will continue to do that in the future. But if there's a proportion of the increasing number of people going on to these benefits who we think with a bit of extra support we could get into work, that is entirely in line with the values of the Labour Party, and entirely in line with the duties of any government, which is to face up to the big challenges facing the country. And it's in that spirit that the government will bring forward its reform package later today. Long-term sick should not languish on benefits. People on long-term sickness benefits should not languish there forever, Pat McFadden said as he confirmed reassessment reforms would be among welfare changes set out by the government on Tuesday. Asked whether support for people with mental health conditions should be time-limited, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster told Times Radio, "We do think it requires support, but we don't think it renders people permanently. Reassessments will be part of the package announced today. We want people, if they're on long-term sickness benefits, not to languish there forever, but to be reassessed. There have been too few reassessments in recent years." Pat McFadden rejects suggestions UK is irrelevant in Israel-Gaza negotiations. Turning to the topic of Israel, Pat McFadden said Britain will use whatever diplomatic influence we have to try to get a ceasefire in the Middle East restored, Pat McFadden said. Asked about Israeli strikes on Gaza overnight, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster told Sky News, "We will use whatever diplomatic influence we have to try and get that ceasefire restored as soon as possible." Asked whether Israel had been emboldened by U.S. support so that the UK is irrelevant in the dispute, Mr. McFadden said, "I don't believe that's the case. I think the UK has diplomatic influence. Obviously, we work with allies to try and exercise that influence, but I still think the UK's diplomatic voice is counting in a stronger way in the world now than was perhaps the case a year or two ago. Benefit system leaves too many people in a permanent state of dependence. The cabinet is united behind government plans to take on the growing benefits bill," Pat McFadden has insisted. Asked whether the whole cabinet supported the move, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster told Times Radio, "Yes, I believe the cabinet is united behind taking on the issue of the growing benefits bill." He said the current system leaves too many people in a permanent state of dependence on benefits, without the opportunity of work.